They shot 6 people. 3 died, 3 lived.
My name is Henry Bolden, but they call him RonDu because he had knowledge of self too.
Sit up there 112 years to life. Was it worth it?
In the mid-'80s, Queens was drowning in money. Cash was moving faster than the cops could even count. But in those streets, every hustler feared one man who wasn't out to build an empire. He was out to tear every one of them down. He robbed Harlem's golden boy, Azie Faison, and even had the nerve to cross Queens' own kingpin, Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols. His name alone was enough to make even the hardest hustlers tense up. It carried the weight of a homicide sentence. But RonDu wasn't just some reckless thug. He was the cold result of a system that raised predators.
I'm hooking you up. You got money in your pocket? I'll deal the block. It's my block.
No, you can't.
His story shows what happens when survival turns into violence, and violence becomes the only language that gets respect. See, in Queens, there were 2 kinds of players, the hustlers and the wolves. Hustlers like Azie Faison, Rich Porter, Alpo, and Fat Cat Nichols were the flashy ones, dripped in gold, cruising in slick rides, stacking cash till the tables cracked. They weren't just getting rich. They were showing everyone that if you had the heart to risk it all, you could rise straight out of poverty. Then came the stick-up kids, the wolves of the night. They weren't pushing weight or running supply lines. They were lurking in the shadows, waiting for a hustler to slip up just once. They didn't want fame, just fast money. And their hustle wasn't product, it was fear.
Real boss of Queens.
Huh.
That's like when you sit there and you listen to Preem and you listen to Cat, you know, that's on the South Side that they did stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a person that was over all of them. And that's the thing that's never been.
Henry RonDu Bolden was one of those wolves. He grew up seeing the same streets, the same hustle. But while others built empires, RonDu built his reputation by taking them apart. While Fat Cat was running his crew and AZ was stacking paper uptown, RonDu was the grim reminder that no matter how big you got, there was always someone watching, waiting to take it all. Back then, nobody was safe. One day you're king, the next you're on the pavement with your stash gone. That's why hustlers rolled with armed guards, kept tight crews, and lived in constant paranoia. Because in Queens, power never lasted long. Off it. The dirtier things got, the more alive he felt. Back then, police corruption ran wild. Cops weren't just turning a blind eye to the illicit substance game. Half of them were in the game. Some officers were robbing the same hustlers they were supposed to arrest, flipping those same bricks right back onto the streets for cash. It was a filthy era where a badge and a stick-up mask looked way too much alike. Now picture being a teenager in Queens during all that madness.
They wanted that fast money. And what they did is they went out there and they started jumping on any drug dealer that they feel that was out there that was making money.
Your school's falling apart, your family can't keep the lights on, and every night you pass cars you'll never afford, Bentleys, Benzes, Cadillacs, parked outside the cribs of illicit substance dealers barely older than you. The choices hit fast: hustle, rob, or go hungry. For RonDu, that choice wasn't hard. He wasn't about to starve. The Bolden name should have meant something better. His father, Reverend Henry Bolden, stood every Sunday in a Bronx church preaching about discipline and salvation. But outside those church doors, on the cracked sidewalks of the Claremont projects, those sermons didn't mean a thing. Poverty shouted louder than prayer. Hunger spoke the only truth that mattered. The streets raised Henry RonDu Bolden and his brothers in a language their father couldn't ever translate. By the early 70s, after their parents split and their mother was left to raise them on public assistance, the Boldens were already slipping through every so-called safety net. School programs, crisis centers, juvenile services, none of it stuck. They didn't need saving, they needed survival. A court official would later sum it up perfectly, saying, the system absolutely guaranteed that the Boldens would not make it. The Claremont houses weren't just poor, they were a factory for wolves. Even the Timmons twins, legends in their own right, were already setting the blueprint for armed robbery with pride. That same brutal energy lived at 1420 Washington Avenue, a place where cruelty wasn't shocking, it was just normal. And the Boldens? They fit right into that madness. Each brother carved out his own spot in the underworld. Curtis, the oldest, would rob anyone. Even old folks weren't safe. Ernest, hooked on dope, was still vicious when his addiction came calling. And Robert, the youngest, overcompensated with raw violence, trying to prove he belonged in that jungle. But Henry was different. Alongside his cousin, Isaac "Just Me" Bolden, he became infamous not just for robbing, but for hunting the most dangerous prey on the streets, illicit substance dealers. They weren't just stick-up kids. They were predators who hit trap houses and stash spots, knowing their victims couldn't call the cops even if they wanted to. That's how they earned their title as the godfathers of crib robbery. Henry's first mark of distinction came early. His rap sheet stretched back to the 60s, but the crime that defined who he really was went down in 1977. At just 17, Henry and a partner brutally robbed an 84-year-old man and his 74-year-old wife. Court records said the old man's teeth were ripped straight from his mouth during the attack. And when Bolden showed up in court for sentencing, he laughed. Not nervous laughter, not guilty laughter. Cold, fearless, defiant laughter. While his friends chuckled from the back row. That right there showed how far gone he already was. A predator who'd lost all sense of consequence. He got sentenced to 8 to 25 years, but prison didn't change him. It made him colder. By the time he hit the streets again in the mid-'80s, the crack era was exploding. New York had turned into a gold rush. Teenagers flipping rocks into fast riches overnight. But that same gold rush painted bullseyes on their backs. Dealers lived paranoid, cash in shoeboxes, guns under pillows, because they knew the wolves were watching. And Henry "RonDu" Bolden was one of the most fatal of them all. He wasn't about building empires. He specialized in tearing them down. In his world, robbing a kingpin and walking away alive was worth more than any illicit substance empire you could build. Police and prosecutors had one name for them. The Bolden brothers were a one-family crime wave. Detectives said wherever they moved, trouble followed like a storm. They weren't tied to any crew, didn't answer to any boss, and definitely didn't play by the street's unspoken rules. They weren't workers under an illicit substance lord. They were independent raiders who hit whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted. RonDu wasn't scared of anybody. Names that others whispered about with fear, Fat Cat, AZ, Harlem, all as walking ATMs, waiting to be cracked open. That was the stick-up kid code, heartless, reckless, and fearless. RonDu didn't just use violence, he lived off it. Fear wasn't a side effect of his robberies, it was his weapon. When people heard his name, they froze. His rep echoed through neighborhoods where hustlers thought they were untouchable. The irony? These same dealers who ruled their blocks like kings were suddenly prey again when the Boldens came hunting. And one of the biggest names to fall victim? None other than Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols. By the mid-1980s, Fat Cat was the undisputed king of Jamaica, Queens, running one of the most feared and organized illicit substance operations in the entire country. Even when he was behind bars, his word hit harder than most men's bullets. Everyone knew, cross Fat Cat, and you weren't just risking beef, you were signing your warrant. So when Henry "RonDu" Bolden decided to rob him, people couldn't believe it. To anyone who knew the game, that move looked like straight-up suicide. But RonDu wasn't built like everyone else. He didn't care about empires or future plans. His game was all about the now. Quick hits, violent stick-ups, and living on pure adrenaline. And then came his wildest opportunity yet, one born from family ties. Fat Cat's girlfriend, Lennon, was the gatekeeper to his cash, trusted with hundreds of thousands at a time. That kind of position meant you had Fat Cat's confidence and by extension, his protection. That money should have been off limits, untouchable. But betrayal always starts close to home. And this one came straight from RonDu's own blood. RonDu's cousin, Isaac "Just Me" Bolden, had once been tight with Fat Cat since childhood. After doing time, Fat Cat looked out for him, gave him a car, some money, even a steady job to keep him straight. In a world where loyalty was supposed to be sacred, that kind of gesture meant everything. But when RonDu showed up whispering about a big score, temptation hit harder than loyalty ever could. Just Me finally gave in. He told RonDu where Lennon's house was. His only condition? No slaying. Keep it clean. Get in, get out. But that rule didn't last even 10 minutes. One quiet afternoon on a Long Island street, two of Fat Cat's men, Bobo and Jughead, pulled up to Lennon's place to drop off cash. Minutes later, masked gunmen burst out from the bushes. One of them was RonDu. They stormed the house, shouting orders, pressing guns to skulls. Lennon got pistol whipped as the crew tore the place apart. Drawers flying, furniture flipped, everyone screaming. When it was done, they walked out with over $500,000 in cash plus jewelry. An insane payday for any stick-up kid. But what RonDu didn't realize was that he just made the most fatal mistake of his life. In the chaos, his mask slipped. Jughead, lying cuffed on the floor, couldn't see him head on. But across the room, a mirror caught RonDu's reflection. One glance was enough. He recognized that face from prison, Henry RonDu Bolden. That one slip-up sealed the Bolden's fate forever. Word traveled fast in Fat Cat's world. Too fast. There were no meetings, no warnings, no second chances. Even locked up, Fat Cat still ran the streets from behind bars. He tapped the Supreme Team, one of the most feared crews in Queens, to deliver payback immediately. Their leader, Gerald Prince Miller, moved fast. 2 corrupt parole employees, a parole officer and a secretary, were paid $3,000 to hand over the home addresses of both Henry and Isaac Bolden. And once that info hit the streets, it was open season. On August 7th, 1987, Isaac Just Me Bolden was standing next to his brown Cadillac outside his mother's house in Jamaica when a car pulled up slow. Then bullets started flying. 4 shots tore through his body before he hit the ground. He was rushed to Jamaica Hospital, but it was too late. Fat Cat's revenge had been written, in blood. But it wasn't over. RonDu was next. The hitters came for him in the Bronx, ambushing his spot. But somehow, by pure luck or instinct, he slipped through. He wasn't untouched, though. From that day on, he was a marked man, hunted by the same streets he once terrorized. From that moment on, Henry RonDu Bolden was living on borrowed time. Every breath he took came with end chasing right behind it. Even Fat Cat himself admitted years later that what went down wasn't simple. Reflecting on the betrayal, he said, "I love Just, but he gave me no choice. It was the law of the jungle." To him, it wasn't about the $500,000 lost. It was about respect and betrayal. In that world, broken trust had only one punishment, end. But 2 weeks after his cousin's unaliving, RonDu wasn't grieving. He was plotting. The streets never stopped, and neither did he. If anything, losing Isaac only sharpened his hunger for revenge and fast money. In August 1987, RonDu linked up with 2 men just as dangerous as he was, Ronald Ace Timmons and Kevin Clark. Clark was the key to the whole play. He wasn't just some street hanger-on. He was dating Azie Faison's sister. That gave him access, trust, and inside knowledge most could only dream about. AZ had looked out for him, set him up with a block, a car, and $15,000 to start his own hustle. It was the kind of chance hustlers prayed for. But Clark didn't see a blessing, he saw a ceiling. In AZ's own words years later, Clark must have been thinking, damn, if he set me up like this, how much he got? That envy turned fatal. The plan was simple. Hit AZ's stash spot, an apartment in the Bronx owned by his aunt, and walk out filthy rich. That same day, AZ was uptown, playing ball for $5,000, had no clue what was waiting for him. When the game wrapped, he drove straight to his aunt's apartment to grab a ½ kilo from the safe. But by the time he pulled up, the wolves were already inside. Masks on, guns out, and nerves shaking. At first, it looked like a clean robbery. Quick in and out, grab the coke and the cash, no blood spilled. But then came the moment that flipped everything. Azie was face down on the floor, hearing voices bark orders, and suddenly, one of them sounded familiar. He turned his head and said, "Kev, what you doing, man?" The room went silent. Kevin Clark froze, panicked, and ripped off his mask. That 1 second of weakness changed everything. The heist turned into a massacre. Clark completely snapped. Panic took over and he shouted to the others, "You said my name. End everyone in this apartment." In an instant, the whole place exploded in gunfire. 25 shots ripped through the walls, the floors, the air, turning that quiet Bronx apartment into a battle zone. People fell where they stood. AZ's aunt, Myra Enoch, 50 years old, gone instantly. Joan Blue, a 44-year-old family friend, and Charles Parker, just 23, never made it out alive either. Michael Lamar got hit 5 times, and a 13-year-old girl, Lynette Bell, took 2 bullets to the head and somehow survived. Azie himself was hit 9 times. 2 in the head, 1 in the neck, 1 in the shoulder, and his legs shattered by more rounds. The aftermath was chaos. Neighbors hit the floor, sirens wailed, and paramedics swarmed the scene. When they carried Azie out, he was barely breathing, more ghost than man. To this day, when he talks about it, his voice isn't filled with anger. It's resignation, like he already knew betrayal came with the life he chose. And the cruelest part? For all that blood spilled, for all those lives taken, the take was pathetic. Just 5 or 6 grand in cash and a $15,000 chain. That's it. No bricks, no safe stacked with cash, just crumbs compared to what they thought they'd score. All that for pocket change. But the shock that followed wasn't just about the slayings. It was who they hit. Azie wasn't some corner boy. He was Harlem royalty, tight with Rich Porter, plugged into a network of hustlers who had real muscle behind them. To rob him and leave him bleeding on his aunt's floor wasn't just reckless. It was suicidal. This wasn't some random stick-up. This was family betrayal. A sister's boyfriend turning wolf, storming into one of Harlem's top hustlers' homes and leaving bodies behind. Word spread fast. Whispers in barbershops, late-night talk in jail cells, legends in the making. The Azie Faison robbery became the stick-up that shook Harlem from the streets all the way to the screen, etched forever in the city's bloody history. When Paid in Full hit theaters in 2002, everyone knew what they were watching. It was Harlem's story come to life, a dramatized version of the rise and fall of Azie Faison, Rich Porter, and Alpo Martinez, showing how fast money could lift you up and destroy you just as quick. But beneath that flashy surface, the movie pulled from a deeper well of New York street legends, pieces of real stories stitched together to create one unforgettable picture. And hidden inside that tapestry was the ghost of Henry RonDu Bolden. His name wasn't in the credits, but his energy was all over that film. His reckless legacy, the man crazy enough to rob both Azie Faison and Fat Cat Nichols, was quietly folded into one unforgettable character, Calvin, played by Kevin Carroll. Calvin was that neighborhood predator, the stick-up man waiting in the cut until she or powerful as Ace, Mitch, or Rico, but he represented the wolves that thrived off other people's grind, the kind of men who didn't build anything, they took it. For anyone who knew RonDu's story, Calvin's scenes hit too close to home. In the movie, Calvin tries to bully his way into Ace's success. He doesn't care about teamwork or loyalty. He wants the quick come-up, the fast flip, the smash-and-grab lifestyle that defines the short-term hustler. That was RonDu to the bone. He wasn't built like Azie or Rich, who saw themselves as businessmen chasing longevity. RonDu was pure chaos, chasing whatever score he could get. He was the type to kick in your aunt's apartment door, gun drawn, mask on, and take everything you thought was untouchable. Fat Cat's stash, Azie's cocaine, it didn't matter. If he saw a window, he broke through it, literally. And the similarities didn't stop there. The betrayal that defined Calvin's story, using trust to get close, then flipping it for selfish gain, was ripped straight from the Bolden family playbook. RonDu didn't just inspire a character, he became the template for Harlem's most feared kind of criminal, the one who smiles in your face and robs you blind the second you turn your back. RonDu didn't just pull stick-ups on random strangers. He betrayed people who had fed his own blood, clothed him, and treated him like family. Fat Cat had helped Isaac Just Me Bolden get back on his feet after prison, gave him a real shot at redemption. Azie Faison trusted his Harlem stash spot as a safe haven, yet both ended up violated, because RonDu didn't live by any of the street's unspoken rules. He made his own code, and it was written in fear. That's exactly what Calvin symbolized in Paid in Full, the guy you should have never trusted, but somehow let get too close. What made the film so sharp was how it handled that kind of man. Calvin wasn't glorified. He wasn't dressed up as some smooth-talking kingpin or street hero. He was a warning, a cold reminder of how fragile success really was in that world. You could have the cars, the chains, the respect, but one desperate man with a gun could destroy it all in seconds. That was the world RonDu lived in, unstable, ruthless, and always one breath away from disaster. But here's where things get messy. The line between movie fiction and street reality started to blur. Look at the name, Calvin might not ring out like Alpo or Mitch, but to the ones who lived through Harlem and Queens in the 1980s, they knew that character's DNA came from RonDu Bolden. They saw the resemblance immediately, the wild energy, the betrayal, the hunger that turned loyalty into weakness. Even if Hollywood never said it out loud, people in the streets did. And that's how legends are born, not from facts, but from whispers that sound too real to ignore. Over time, the mix of truth and storytelling made it almost impossible to separate what really happened from what was myth. Was Calvin directly based on RonDu? Or was he a blend of every stick-up kid who terrorized Harlem during that era? Honestly, it doesn't even matter, because in the world of New York street legends, perception is reality. Once people started connecting those dots, saying Calvin was RonDu, that rumor became part of his legacy. For a man like Henry RonDu Bolden, who left behind more scars than stories, the myth outgrew the man. And maybe that's how it was always meant to be, because RonDu was never remembered for building anything, only for what he tore down. And when he finally went on trial, that legacy of chaos followed him straight into the courtroom. The courtroom turned into a stage, and the show was already sold out. By the time Henry RonDu Bolden's case hit Bronx Supreme Court, presided over by Judge Lawrence Tanetti, the streets already knew how it would end. The stick-up kid who dared to rob Harlem legends and Queens kingpins wasn't walking out free, ever. The only question left was how hard the hammer would fall. And when it dropped heavy. RonDu was sentenced to 112 years to life. No parole, no appeal, no second act. The judge made it crystal clear. This man would never breathe fresh air again outside prison walls. Even his right-hand man, Ronald Ace Timmons, got the same brutal sentence. But what stunned everyone wasn't the time. It was RonDu's reaction. He didn't flinch. People who were there said he took the sentence like he'd taken every beating and blade on the streets, straight to the chin. No tears, no shaking voice, no signs of fear. For a man who'd built his legend off intimidation and chaos, showing weakness would have been the real sentence. So he stood there, stone still, like he'd already accepted that this was the only way his story could end. But behind those prison walls, Henry Bolden didn't just vanish, he transformed. He became RonDu, a name rooted in the teachings of the 5% nation, meaning knowledge of self. Inside, that gave him a different kind of power, spiritual authority, the kind that demanded respect without violence. To some inmates, he was still that ruthless stick-up kid, the same man who once ripped gold teeth from an old man's mouth. But to others, he'd become something else entirely, a man you could talk to, reason with, even learn from. That contradiction followed him everywhere, fear and respect, destruction and wisdom, all living in one body. Survival inside was its own battlefield. The hustlers who once ran empires on the streets could buy safety or call in favors from their crews. But a stick-up kid? They had no such network. Inside, they were hated as much as they were feared. The ultimate loners, living off reputation alone. And yet RonDu somehow found a way to stand tall even there. Because whether it was on the cold corners of Queens or the cold walls of a prison cell, he had always lived by one rule. Never show fear, even when end's already watching you breathe. Hustlers saw stick-up kids as traitors, wolves feeding off the very world they helped build. And if you robbed the wrong man on the outside, you could bet his people would be waiting for you on the inside. RonDu Bolden knew that rule better than anyone. He'd already paid for one of those choices after robbing Fat Cat Nichols. They came for him fast, blades flashing. The story goes he took over 150 stitches, carved up and left for end, but somehow he survived, just like he always had. That same unbreakable spirit that kept him alive in Queens kept him breathing behind bars. One man who met him on the outside said he was just 14 years old the first time he crossed paths with RonDu on the streets. He said Bolden didn't scare him straight, but he did take notice. RonDu pulled him aside, spoke real to him, and gave him a glimpse of the wisdom buried beneath the violence. Years later, that same man ran into RonDu again, this time inside the Bronx House of Detention's CMC High Security Unit. And what he saw shocked him. RonDu wasn't out here preaching sermons or pretending to be a saint, but he was leading. He called his meetings going to church, not for prayer, but for strategy and survival. A space for connection in a world where everyone had to watch their back. Even locked away, RonDu could still gather men around him, But prison isn't built to celebrate legends. It's built to break them. The longer he stayed inside, the more his name turned into something mythic, frozen in time, a story passed around like a ghost tale among inmates. People whispered about him, not for what he was doing now, but for what he had done. His sentence made him more than just a man. It made him a warning. To the younger generation, RonDu Bolden became living proof of where that stick-up life leads, to bars, scars, and a name that echoes longer than your freedom ever will. To his peers, he was a walking contradiction, enemy and brother all in one, the kind of man who might send you to the infirmary if you crossed him, but also slide you a care package if you earned his respect. And that's the haunting legacy he left behind. A life that burned fast, hit hard, and never backed down. So what do you think? Was Henry RonDu Bolden a product of his environment? Or a man who chose chaos when he could have walked another path? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like, subscribe, and share if you found this story as wild as we did. And we'll catch you on the next one.